Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Bryan Clayton. Bryan, welcome.
Thomas, thanks for having me on the show. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Bryan Clayton. I am CEO and co-founder of a company called GreenPal. And so GreenPal is a mobile app. It works like Uber, but for lawn mowing. So if you live in the United States and you need to get your grass cut, rather than calling around on Craigslist or Yelp or Facebook, you just download our app and somebody will come out and mow your yard the same day. Been at this business for 9 years. I guess you could say we're a 9-year overnight success. Started off in Nashville, Tennessee. Now we're nationwide, several 100,000 people using the app, doing over $20 million a year in revenue. And what's unique about us is we haven't taken on any outside capital, no institutional capital. Everything is funded off of its own revenues. And it's kind of rare in the tech world, especially in marketplaces. So we've kind of had to sing for our supper every step of the way. Before GreenPal, I actually had a landscaping business, and over a 50 period of time, built up one of the largest landscaping companies in the Southeast, getting it over 150 employees, over 10 million a year in revenue. So growing that business just for me and a push mower to me and 150 people, I learned a lot the hard way, trying how to get a business going. So that's 22 years of leadership in one industry. I've kind of seen it from every angle you can see it from.
Before an episode, I'll sort of agree on a topic of conversation. So it'll be a particular business topic, but every now and again, I think I'll hear what a story is, and I'm like, yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about that. So the building 2 8-figure businesses from scratch, and not only that, but kind of exiting as well. So it's kind of like a closed loop. So remind me again, which was the first business?
The first business was the traditional blue collar landscaping business. And so I kind of learned this through trial and error, how to build and scale a business in that type of service-based business. And I learned how the landscaping industry worked from the inside out. And then I kind of, after 15 years of that, sold the business, retired, didn't have to work anymore, which was nice. But then I got bored and thought, okay, I'm going to start a tech company. And boy, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know how hard that was going to be. But I took everything I learned and rolled it into my tech company, GreenPal, and learned the tech side, learned how to build software, learned how to write code, learned how to develop software. And so kind of combined the blue collar with the tech entrepreneur kind of sides of the world, and was able to kind of build GreenPal without having to raise any outside capital, because I kind of had all of that knowledge to roll into it.
So before you started your first business, how did it come about? So are you an employee, or what's the situation now?
Yeah, my first company, actually, I was forced into the business by my father on a hot summer day. He said, "Get off your butt. I got a gig for you. You're going to go mow the neighbor's yard." And I wasn't living in a democratic household. And so he made me go cut the neighbor's grass. Luckily, he did that because something about that stuck with me. I made $20 for an hour's work. And I thought, this is amazing. I can just do this. Why wouldn't anybody do this? And so I passed. The first thing I did after that was I passed out a bunch of flyers all over the neighborhood, and got like 10 or 12 customers that first summer. And I never looked back. Just stuck with that little lawn mowing business year after year, all through high school, all through college. Eventually, when I was in college, I had like 10 or 12 employees. And when I graduated college, I had to make a decision. Was I going to go into the job market and take a pay cut, or stick with this landscaping company I had built? And I didn't really want to be a lawn guy my whole life, but I thought, this could be the thing. This could be my lane to make something of myself, to make something that matters, to build something. And so I thought, well, let's just, I learned a little bit in business school. Let's make a business plan and let's set a 5-year business plan, and got everything done in 2 or 3 years, and just never looked back. And eventually grew it to 8 figures and over 100 people, and got the business sold, which doesn't happen very often in the landscaping industry. These businesses are usually not acquired.
So how long do you do that business before you consider hiring someone?
It's one of the hardest decisions in a service-based business, really any business, but in a service-based business, it's one of the hardest businesses, because effectively in one decision, it's probably the only moment in business where you'll make one decision and it doubles your business. Like you go from just you doing all the work, now you hiring somebody, you effectively have to double your business overnight. So it's really tough, and it's a make or break decision in many cases for many companies that first hire or two. And so for me, I did it wrong. I did it wrong for about a year. The guy I was paying was making more money than I was making. So I figured this is not working. And I really had to really look at, okay, well, what are the units? What's the unit economics of this business? Even though it was just me mowing grass, I was like, okay, it's really just hours. I'm selling hours of the day, and that's it. And I have to figure out, okay, how many hours a day can we sell? And how many hours can I work? And if I hire somebody, what can I sell their labor hours for and still make a margin? And it took me like 3 years to figure that out. Because back then, this is the early 2000s, we didn't have blogs, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have podcasts. And so you kind of had to figure this stuff out on your own. And so just through trial and error, I was able to figure out that, okay, for every man that I stick in the field, I can sell those labor hours and make a margin on them if I'm doing everything right. And from there, it was duplication, and all, eventually up to 100, over 100 people.
So you said you got it wrong for 3 years. Does that mean the team size stayed the same for 3 years?
Yeah, for 3 years, it was basically me and a helper, maybe me and two helpers. And I was just really trying to figure, okay, how do I price work to be able to send people out to execute the work with me, and to where, not only do they need to be billing out, $35 or $45 an hour, but my time needs to be at least that too. And then how do I recover all that? And then how do I find the type of clients that'll pay that? And really trying to figure that out took about 3 years. And then from that moment, you go from, okay, well, now I want to send out like a crew, just those guys, and then I'll go run another crew. So that's a big moment. And then you do that again, and then you got 3 crews. I'm still running one of them. And that's a really hard part of the business, because you're doing the sales, the bookkeeping, the answering of the phones, the equipment maintenance, and you're doing the physical labor. So you're very much on the business and in the business. Did that for 2 or 3 years. And it's really just working your way through kind of like the metaphorical levels of business is kind of how I got through that first business. And, and I started the second company, GreenPal. I've been at this one for 10 years. It's very different, but in many ways, it's very similar. You're working your way through the levels of business. You just focus all of your intensity to get through level 1, whatever that is, and don't worry about anything else until you get through level 1. And for me, it's like that's for 20 years, that's all I've done, is just like get through one level at a time, and it's figure it out as you go. And that's what's worked for me in both businesses, getting them to 8 figures.
So when do you decide to sell the first business? What's the thought process there, and how did it go?
Ideally, you work an exit plan. You work a plan that's like 5 years, and you work backwards. And so you ask yourself, like, okay, I want to sell this business, and what would have to be true for me to be able to sell it? And so you would say, well, I got to get sales to this, and I got to get I got to hire these types of people, and like this equipment needs to be upgraded. I need these types of customers, whatever. I did not do that. I was running like a 8-figure, one of the largest companies in my market. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks one day that, my company is the thing that lends like an interesting storyline to my life. It is the thing that gives me purpose. It is the thing that causes me to drive forward and to level up in life. And for 15 years, my company was doing that for me, but I kind of hit a plateau. And I noticed that it took about a year for it to really set in. And I was like, I'm just really not getting the purpose from this business that I once was. And once I felt that, I thought, well, let's explore selling the company. And from the moment that I had that idea in my head, from the moment that I was able to get the business sold, was like a little over 2 years. So it was 2 years of excruciating, like pain of reverse engineering a lot of the systems into the business that needed to be in it, fixing up a lot of the accounting, making hires that I didn't have, a lot of these kind of like these things that I should have been doing all along. Had I worked a proactive plan, I could have had a much better outcome. Still had a great outcome, but I probably could have had double the outcome if I had worked a 5-year plan. So for me, I kind of did it the wrong way, but I still got it done. But ideally, you work like a 5-year plan. And the other thing is the way you run a business that you are ultimately going to sell versus the way you run like a family business that you're going to keep forever is vastly different. They're very different strategies. Your decision making is different between the way you run the business in those two types of scenarios. And so, had I known, I'd done it differently, but it still worked out.
So who ended up, or how did you find the buyer?
So I made a lot of bad decisions, but one of the smart decisions I made was I worked with a broker at that size. It was between 7 and 8 figure deal, and at that size, you're better off working with a broker. So in the world of business acquisitions, there's brokers and then there's investment bankers, and brokers usually deal in like the 500K to $10 million range. And so that was one of the smarter decisions I made. I worked with a broker that had spent basically his lifetime in the landscaping industry selling companies. He had the Rolodex, he had the deals, he knew the players. And so he was able to very quickly look at, okay, yeah, you guys are missing this, this, and this. You guys need to work on this. And then we get X, Y, and Z together. Then we can take it out. And so without him, it would have never happened. And he made good money. I mean, he made really good money selling what it took me 15 years to build, but it was worth it because he helped me get the deal done.
And how did it feel when the money landed?
It's one of those moments. It feels good, but on the other hand, it's like when you run something for that long, for 15 years, it very much becomes part of your identity. Who you are, especially like a very hand-to-hand combat style business like that. You're very much in the trenches with your people. And so really that becomes your family, and you end up spending more time with them than you do your real family. Like that business was 6-7 days a week. And so it was almost like a piece of me was no longer there. It was really strange. It was like a melancholy that set in. It was a mourning period. And so it would caught me by surprise that was the case. It was no longer my baby. This thing was my purpose. This thing was the reason I got out of bed in the morning, and it was no longer mine. And now somebody else owns it. So that's a very strange thing. It's kind of like if you were married to the love of your life, and then all of a sudden, like another man moves in, and then you got to tell him like how to be her husband, and it's just a bizarre thing that was totally not prepared for. And so got it done, got through it, but it didn't feel like I thought it would. But it was the right move because now I started GreenPal, which is a tech company. And I think if you're doing business right, you should evolve every 2 or 3 years into a completely new person. And I'm not even the same person I was 10 years ago. And that's because of my business, GreenPal. It has caused me to learn new things, learn new skills, tackle new challenges. And that was what I was needing at the time.
So although that period was more difficult than you thought it would be, it was still the right decision, you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It never looked back, never regretted it, never wished that I hadn't moved on and started the next chapter, because life has just been, it's just like for 20 years, it's just been an awesome like movie for me. Like it's just been an awesome storyline. It's been an awesome, interesting story. And the business has always been the thing that's caused it to be interesting. And so I was getting to a point where it was like that boring part of the movie. And it's like nothing happening. Well, you cut that part out. And so for me, it was the right move, right time. I look back, I'm so glad I did it. And I not any earlier either. I don't wish I had done it earlier. It worked out perfectly.
And what do you do day one after you've essentially gotten rid of your business?
Yeah, well, so day one, you're still in there. You're helping with the transition, and so it's that weird part. It's like the new husband moves into the house, and you're still living there. So that was weird. And so that was like what day 1 through 6 months looked like. And then so after that, after you kind of phase out, and then you realize, holy crap, I don't have to drive to the office anymore. What am I going to do today? That's when like the real identity crisis sets in, and you're like, well, for the first time in 16 years, I can go on a vacation. And so I did, and so I traveled a bunch. I went to Costa Rica for like a month, and then realized a lot that like you can only lay on a beach so long. You can only like screw off so long. Like I remember like one time the biggest challenge I had faced an entire week was the bar ran out of my favorite type of tequila, and I was like, well, this is I'm wired and cut out to solve bigger problems than this. So you realize that about yourself, and you realize that the business is the thing that lends purpose to your life. The business is the thing that makes life important. At least it was and is for me. And so then I thought, well, I need to start another company. I need to get back in the game. And I didn't want to work that hard again, but I kind of wanted to get my hands dirty. And so I thought, okay, well, that was really tough. Almost killed myself starting and selling that company. I want to start an easy company now, and so I want to start a software business because that'll be so much simpler. And boy, I didn't know what I didn't know. It was naivete as an asset, and recruited two co-founders. Had the idea for GreenPal. I've been sitting on that idea for a long time because I was kind of solving my own problem. And we went to work and never looked back. Here we are, a decade later. We've built a decent business.
How long before you get the idea for it? Or maybe because if you've had that idea for a while, how long before you start implementing, and what do you do?
Had the idea, and it wasn't like a big aha moment. It was just one that I was just annoyed and thought it should exist. So running that company, we were like one of the bigger companies in town, and so we had all these trucks going out every day, 90 trucks, and so we were very visible in our local marketplace. And we would get calls every day, 30, 40, sometimes as many as 50 phone calls every day. Will you come just mow my yard? And we didn't do those types of basic services anymore. We did big like office parks, apartments, airports, things like that. And so we would have to kindly tell these people, well, we don't do that. But one of the values we had running that company was to always be helpful. And so we would keep a list of names and phone numbers by the phone, and we would refer out smaller service providers that really wanted that kind of work. And it would be a win-win. They would be happy, the homeowner would be happy. Maybe we got some good karma out of it. And that's just what we did. But what would happen a lot of times is those people would call back and they would say, hey, I called those 11 people, left 5 voicemails. 2 of them, didn't pick up. One guy was supposed to give me an estimate. I hired one guy and he didn't show up. Do you have any other names? And so it's kind of like one of these no good deed goes unpunished things. And so I just saw every day, somebody who needs a basic service done, the service providers that are ready, willing, and able to do those services are just hard to find. It's hard to get pricing. It's hard to hire them, and it's difficult to pay them. And so I thought an app needs to exist to just make all this happen magically. And this was pre-Uber. This was Airbnb. I just thought, something needs to exist to make that happen. And then I saw like Uber come to life, and I was like, hey, yeah, that. I just need that, but for lawn mowing. Somebody should build that. It wouldn't be that hard. And I thought, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to do it. And I recruited 2 co-founders, thought we would have it built, done, and nationwide in a year. And it took a decade.
Wow. Why did it take a decade?
Well, so what's funny is like the original vision of I should be able to push a button, get quotes, and hire somebody to mow my yard, and they come out the same day. That's what it was 10 years ago. That's what we do today. That didn't change. But it's like the strategy and the way you bring that to life is changes a million times. And so that like iterative process takes a long time. The other thing too that I under indexed on, and I think a lot of new entrepreneurs don't really understand this. No, I know I didn't. There's a big difference between building a business, starting a new restaurant, starting a new lawn mowing company, starting a new marketing agency, starting a new hair salon. That's tough. But there's a big difference between that and inventing a brand new product that does not yet exist, that nobody's ever seen or used. Like those two are vastly different. They're almost not even the same game. and this one is an order of magnitude harder. And I didn't understand that until I got in there and thought, holy crap, like there's no roadmap for what we're doing here. We're kind of like nobody's pushing a button and getting their grass cut. And even furthermore, lawn mowing services aren't accustomed to doing business this way. So it took a long time through trial and error to figure out the product, how it needed to look, and strike like the delicate balance between the wants and desires of both sides of the transaction. Because homeowners want somebody to come mow it for $20 and do a perfect job and once a month, and and for them to show up in 30 minutes. Well, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Whereas service providers want somebody to sign up for every 7 days, and they want them to pay $50, and they want to go on the day they want to go on, and maybe sometimes they don't feel like blowing off the back patio, and if their child was sick, then they should be able to take off that day. And like there's a million things that can go wrong between somebody wanting the service done and the service provider getting it done. And so like solving those things one at a time with technology took a long time, a lot longer than I thought it would. But we kept seeing like validation along the way that, yeah, this is working. Yeah, we're on to something, we're talk about those more metaphorical levels of business. The first level was just getting our first 100 customers. And we passed out door hangers to do that. Like we passed out flyers, and we knew we just needed to get 100 customers so we could learn from them. We would meet with them, and they would tell us every which way we sucked. The guy didn't show up. He did a crappy job. Quotes were too high. I got a quote, but he didn't have any reviews. I hired him, but he rescheduled 4 times. I hired him, but he mowed and the grass was wet, so he left clumps everywhere. I hired him, he mowed, he left my back gate open and the dog got out. I hired him, he mowed once, but he didn't come back the second time. Or I hired him and he saw our grass was tall and he raised the price on me. A million things can go wrong. And so they would tell us where we sucked, but they never told us, I don't need this. We never heard that one time. We never saw apathy. We never saw like that meh, like, like they wanted it to work. They were pissed off that it did not work out. And so that was validation to keep moving. And so like that validation has always been there every step of the way.
I can certainly see how that would keep you busy, all those problems.
Yeah.
But is there any, I guess, principle or insight that you would share as to how you went about solving all those issues? Because I can see a lot of people, maybe not this in this particular example, but a lot of people being like, maybe I won't go ahead with this particular idea because of all the variables of what could go wrong. What advice would you give those people?
Yeah, some things, it's tough. Like there's no one single silver bullet answer. Like just keep going and solve every problem. Because some things are too nuanced, and there will never be an Uber for wedding photography. Maybe there will be, but so for us, we saw the opportunity to smooth out all the rough edges little by little, and one methodology that we used was the Toyota lean manufacturing methodology of the 5 whys. And so anytime something goes wrong, you ask why 5 times. And so it's like, okay, the guy showed up, but he showed up. Okay, so I'll give you an example. The guy showed up 2 days late, and he was late because it rained. Well, what went wrong? Well, it rained. Okay. Well, why didn't he know to reschedule it ahead of time when it was going to rain? Well, because he really wasn't looking at the weather. Well, why wasn't he looking at the weather? Well, because he's got we don't have weather in the app. Okay, well, why don't we? Well, because that's backlogged and we got these 9 other things. Well, let's move that to the front. Let's build that. Let's say along with the appointments, we say it's going to 90% chance of rain on Thursday. You've got 9 lawns on Thursday. Do you want to go ahead and mow them a day early? And so so working through the product solution to solve that problem. Or he left the gate, he showed up, but his lawnmower deck was too wide for the gate size. Okay, well, why didn't he know that the gate size was too small? Well, because the homeowner didn't tell him. Well, why didn't the homeowner tell him? Well, because we don't have anything in our onboarding that talks about gate sizes. Well, maybe we should put another little step in there. Do you have a gate size? How wide is it? Like, so going through this over and over and over again, asking why 5 times until you get to the root cause of what the issue is, and then figuring out the product solution to that over and over and over again is how you can solve these problems, and it's what's worked for us.
So you got a very intricate app, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, it's everything that's like magical. Like great technology should seem magical. And I don't know who said that, but it's a quote, and it should be indistinguishable from magic. And so when you push a button and an Uber shows up in 3 minutes, it's magic. But it would like make your head spin as to how many, probably billions of lines of code have gone into making that experience happen, and how many like thousands of employees have gone into making that experience happen. And so for us, it's like not on that magnitude, but it's pretty similar. Like, there's a million things we've done behind the scenes to make that experience happen reliably and predictably.
So what about the tech side of this? Because it's a recurring theme for me where someone, if in an attempt to start an app, they tend to say it was very expensive and we had to go through loads of people in order to find someone that was actually good. Have you had any of those experiences?
Yeah, obviously. When we started, none of us knew how to code. And so this was like the big first mistake we made. So we thought, this is naivete as an asset. We thought all we had to do was pay a development agency to build what we thought GreenPal would be, and we would market that and we would just be off and going. So we did that, and we pulled together like our own money and spent like $150,000 doing that. And it took them 9 months to build it. We released it, and it was a total failure. It didn't have the features it needed. It was clunky, buggy. And in their defense, we didn't even really know what it needed to be. And so it was just a total failure. And we were confronted with the reality of, if we're going to be in the tech business, we're going to have to learn how to build software. Like, there's just no way. There's just a million things that have to be done and built. We can't like change order this thing to death and rely on a third party or a freelancer to do it. We have to do it ourselves. It's kind of like if you want to start a 5-star restaurant and you don't have a chef, and you've never, like, nobody has ever like developed a recipe. It's impossible. You have to have these things in house. And so for us, we came to that. We were confronted with that reality. My co-founder went to software school to learn back-end programming, took 9 months, and he came out just dangerous enough to work on the next version. And I did the same thing with front end. I learned how to become an awful front end engineer, but enough just to be, just to hack together the second version. And we did that for like 3 more years, just hacking on this thing over and over and over again, getting it up to like maybe 3,000 or 4,000 customers, making just enough money to where we could afford to bring on more developers. But they were under our purview then. We were delegating to them. So there's a big difference between delegation from abdication and delegation from stewardship. So delegation from abdication is like, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do it. It scares me. You handle it. That's a recipe for disaster. What you want to do is delegation from stewardship. It's like, okay, this is how we do this here. This is why we do it this way. This is what the goal is. This is what the vision is. This is what the strategy is. And here's the specs. Here's what I expect from you. And here's when I want it by. And by the way, I know how much it should cost. And so that's delegation from stewardship. And so it wasn't until we had like the 80-20 acumen on development that we were able to build out a team of developers around us. And we did that. And it was only because we learned it. And then what another funny thing, this is probably year 3. I was coding, my co-founder was coding. My third co-founder was doing a lot of the PR, a lot of the content, and a lot of other things, backlink building for SEO and things like that. But he still had some time. And we were like, you should learn how to at least do front end so you can help us. And he just could not pick it up. But back then you could drive for Uber and make like $30 or $40 an hour. So we figured out that he could drive for Uber, and every hour he drove, we could afford an hour of dev time. And so there was like a swap. We did that for like a year. So so it worked. It was the thing at that level of the game we had to do to get to the next level. He doesn't drive for Uber anymore, obviously. But that was the thing we had to do to get to the next level.
Well, from I don't know, third party perspective, it sounds like you've just got like a lot of Uber perseverance, if you like. But at the point where you've spent, let's say, 150,000 on an app, and I think you said it was a complete failure. Are you having any doubts there, or are you just plowing on, saying until I'll get it until it's done?
It was a big punch in the gut and the stomach. It was demoralizing. Because here we thought, and I think a lot of the grind and a lot of the slog comes down to expectations. And so we expected fully that we were going to like take $150,000 of our hard-earned money, release it, and go get 1 million users in a year. Like that's literally what we thought would happen. So it was a big letdown. But like I was mentioning earlier, when we were at the time, we were reading a book called The Startup Owner's Manual by a guy by the name of Steve Blank. And in that book, he really beats into your head, like get out of the building and talk to your users, talk to your customers. And we were like, well, we don't have any users. We don't have any customers. I guess we got to go get some. I don't know how to get any. Well, I know like 15 years ago when I was starting my first lawn mowing business, I passed out flyers. Let's just do that again. I know we can do that. We passed out like 100,000 door hangers, and we got a couple hundred people to try it. When we talked to them, it was that validation of, you guys suck, but I wish it worked. And it was the I wish it worked thing that kept it going. Had we not heard that, we would have quit. Had we not met with those people, we would have never known. And so we were following that methodology that Steve Blank outlines. It's like a customer development process. All of this stuff laid the groundwork for the Lean Startup, which is a famous book. And so those two are kind of synonymous. And so we were following this Lean Startup methodology of release something that's shitty, get people to use it, talk to them, learn, build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn over and over again. We did that for 3 years and until we finally got a little something going.
Well, you touched on something which I think, maybe it's my perspective, but I think that both the tech and also the getting people to use it are probably the two most difficult things around launching an app. And how have you managed to get the service providers and also the consumers to the level that they're at now?
Yeah, getting people to use it is almost 75% of the game, maybe even more. I see this a lot with new entrepreneurs. It's like great product, great business plan, great idea, no acquisition strategy, no distribution strategy. And it's like they build this thing and then they want to sprinkle on marketing at the end. And it just doesn't work that way. Like you have to innovate on problem solving. You have to innovate on solving a customer's problem. And you have to innovate on product, but you also have to innovate on distribution at the same time. And so for us, like working through these metaphorical levels of the video game of business, the first level was we needed 100 people and 20 vendors. Well, let's go pass out some flyers and let's cold call a bunch of vendors. And so for us, I was able to, I personally knew the first 500 service providers that used the app. They all had my cell phone number, and I would talk to them. And one thing that we offered them was free coaching. I offered them free coaching on how to grow their lawn mowing business as a way to kind of like be the honey and the glue for them to use the crappy version of the app and continue to use it, and to kind of be there when people signed up. So they would quote, they would mow the yard, do a decent job, because we didn't really have the features they needed yet. So we were kind of able to like hack that side of it. And then we could focus on the consumer side. And as we passed out flyers and met with homeowners, they would always tell us, well, normally I would go to Google and I would just search lawn mowing services and I would just start clicking and calling. And that's how I usually find a guy. And so we were like, well, maybe that could be a channel for us. And so we started really looking at, okay, how do we compete in Google search? And we started doing AdWords, and that was a failure. We couldn't afford to play in that game. But we started thinking, okay, well, maybe we can compete in the organic side of it. And we really kind of threw all of our weight into that one channel in the first year, and we haven't looked back since. We've been 8-9 years in Google organic search, doing the things you need to do to compete and get traffic through Google organic search. And like, that's half of our company's bandwidth goes into that one activity.
Wow. Interesting. So in terms of, you mentioned initially about you should have had a, let's say, exit strategy, a 5-year plan, for example. What are your thoughts regarding the exit of GreenPal? Do you have one, or what are your goals if you don't have an exit yet?
Yeah, you know, we're 8-9 years in, and so it's like, it's easy to look back and like the first year. I remember the first moment I had where I was like, this could work, was like in year 2 or maybe even been year 3. It was a Saturday. We were working, and I counted 30 something people signed up, and I didn't know who any of them were. And that was a big moment, because up until then it was very scrappy, hand-to-hand combat. But this was like an indication that you know, we could bend the world to our way, that 30 people could sign up, and I didn't know who any of them were. And so you look back at that moment, very humble. And then now today, as we speak, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are conducting transactions on our platform. You look back, you're like, wow, look how far we've come. But it never ever feels that way. It always feels like day one. It always feels like, man, we have so much further to go. Like, there's so much white space. You know, we want it to go quicker. You want it to grow faster. And so for me, you know, I'm still very much at like in day one of this thing. And so, and I'm having fun. You know, to be honest, the first 5 or 6 years were not fun. They were really tough. But now, you know, I've got a team of 30 something people. They're all smarter than me in some way, which is awesome. And you know, we get stuff done on a daily basis. We hit our goals, and it's fun. So I'm going to keep running the business until it's not fun anymore. I think every business has kind of like 3 phases, which is like the idea phase, you know, the grow up, and then the scale up. Like so like, you know, I'm pretty good at the idea, and I'm you know, the startup, the grow up, and the scale up. So I'm pretty good at the startup, pretty good at the grow up. I've never been in the scale up. Don't really have a desire to like build another company over 100 people and have managers of managers. Like, that doesn't appeal to me. So when that time comes, I'll probably hire a professional CEO or sell the business. But you know, that's probably a ways away. And yeah, for now I'm having a great time. So I'm going to keep doing this so long as I'm having fun, because I haven't worked a day in 9 years. This is what I've wanted to do. And it's a great place to be.
If it doesn't feel like work, why would you bother selling it, right?
What else am I going to do? You know?
Well, this is until you get your next idea though, right? Are you got
well, luckily I'm not terribly creative. And that's something that people ask me a lot. Well, why didn't you quit? Jesus, you didn't pay yourself anything for 3 or 4 years. Why didn't you just give up? And you know, a rational person would, but for me, it was like, I'm always going to be working on my best idea. And that's just it. Like, there's no, like, that's the default. So you're always going to be working on your best idea. Fortunately, I'm not terribly creative. I don't have any other good ideas. So this is it. Like, it's the only way to move is forward. And that's what got us through those hard early years.
Well, you've learned, or you've achieved rather, a lot more than most people have in business. And so, given your experience and what you've achieved, what are some of the key learnings that you've taken away?
Yeah. So in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of dichotomies. There's a lot of paradoxes. And one of them is you got to have this huge goal, and you also have to think and act very, very small. And so that's one thing I've taken away. It's like a lot of this stuff is acting really small, day in, day out, over a long period of time. And the stuff adds up. And so you have to be willing to do that. And I think a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs want to skip that part, like the part of like grinding out a bunch of blog posts, the part of reaching out to a bunch of journalists, the part of learning how to code and doing it and writing code. Like, a lot of that stuff just can't be skipped over. And so thinking and acting small over and over again is is something that I've learned that pays off in the long haul. And, I watched an interview with this dude who interviewed. He was a coach. He interviewed Kobe Bryant, and he was like, I just want to watch you practice, see what you do. He's like, okay, come watch me practice. And he watches Kobe Bryant practice for like 45 minutes. And like Kobe is doing the most basic, like high school, middle school level layups over and over and over again. And then like the most like bounce passes and free throws. And he's like, what? Why? I figured you'd be doing 360 dunks and stuff. And he's like, no, it's the fundamentals that makes me great. I think like business comes down to that. A lot of it is the fundamentals over and over again, and playing, like running the running game over a long period of time is what builds a sustainable business. Sure, sometimes you see these principles broken, but most of the time there are no overnight successes. A lot of time it takes a decade.
When you described all the various problems and the fact that you solved a lot of those problems within GreenPal, it does make sense that if you're the person willing to go through all of that, and keep going with it and keep making it better, that's kind of like maybe the recipe for quote unquote success.
Yeah, I agree. And I watched a documentary the other day. It's on Netflix. It's on Netflix right now, and it's called The Movies That Made Us. And it's like a behind the scenes of how they made like a dozen movies. And so Back to the Future was one of them. I love that movie. And so for an hour, they show you how they made Back to the Future and the million things that went wrong trying to make that movie. And like, you're like, golly, they just would not give up. I mean, it took the script writers 10 years to get somebody to take a chance on it. And then they couldn't get Michael J. Fox, and they got some other guy, and then he sucked, but they were still going to release it. And they realized they couldn't do it anymore. And they convinced Michael J. Fox to do it. And they shot the whole movie with just him and none of the other actors, which I didn't know this. And like all of these things that went wrong trying to make this movie. And I'm like, dude, that's my life for the last 10 years trying to build this company. So you realize none of these, doesn't matter what you're doing. A lot of these breakouts, none of them are easy. They never are. They look easy from the outside, but on the inside, they're never easy.
Well done on your success. I'm glad I heard the story. Is there anything that you'd like to mention that I haven't asked you about today?
Yeah, something that's just top of mind. I listened to an interview with Mark Andreessen. Yeah, Mark Andreessen, who is the inventor of the modern web browser. Like he wrote the first web browser, and he's a famous venture capitalist. And he's talking about when he moved out to San Francisco in 1993 and took some job making $7 an hour, and was working on the first version of what they called Mosaic at the time, which was the first web browser in 1993. But he said when they moved out to San Francisco, they got there, they literally felt like, we missed it. We're too late. All the great computing companies were built in the 70s. They scaled up in the 80s. IBM, Apple, Microsoft, they've dominated it. It's over. And we missed it, and we're too late. It's over. And I mean, how comical that is. And like the dawn of the internet and the World Wide Web and everything, like cloud computing and everything that's happened, social networking and crypto and all this stuff that's happened since then. It's just hilarious, but that's the way he felt. And so I know we've all felt that as entrepreneurs at one time or another, like, oh, well, I'm too late. I missed the gig economy, or I missed crypto, or I missed cloud, or I missed SaaS, or I missed, I missed social or whatever. And it's like, it always feels that way, and it always gets bigger. And that was what I took away, is like, it always gets bigger. It always gets bigger. It's always going to get bigger. It always is going to be abundant. So don't feel that way. Like, move now, because in 10 years you wish you had. And like, I have to tell myself this all the time. So that's one thing. So if somebody could take take anything away from this interview, that's what I would leave them with.
Well, thank you for that. And especially thank you for sharing your story. Where's the best place for people to find you and maybe check out GreenPal?
Yeah, anybody listening to this doesn't want to waste time mowing their yard, just go to greenpal.com. Anybody that wants to hit me up, I put all my time in Instagram, Bryan M. Clayton.
Bryan, thank you very much.
Thomas, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.